um, I love that roundtable. I love watching students and BG, that kid's got something, you know, he's got a confidence that young people don't often have, that don't learn that until late in life. So not that I think that anybody is better than anybody, but I think that his leadership will show a lot to other students that are looking for that kind of confidence. He's a good guy for leading. And I loved the way you answered, Dana, about the levy when one of the students had asked. There was, I won't go into details for lengthwise, but I think that one thing I would love for them to remember is spreading information that they get to their classmates, and students understanding the levy more so that they can spread it to their home and to their community. Because I think that that's where not that we haven't, but I think that the importance of the levy coming from the students' mouths more, I think would mean a lot more, be received better, I think, this time. So it would be really exciting to see that more. But that was my take from today.
All right, thanks, Leanna. And I too have been involved working on the information that the school district needs to promote and produce so that we can inform our community in as many different venues as possible. So we'll continue to work on that. And thank you all for your comments. So now we are at consent agenda items. The consent agenda enables the board to efficiently deal with matters that have been delegated to the superintendent, but by law must be approved by the board. Items on the consent agenda are voted upon as one block and approved with one vote. An item may be removed from the consent agenda only upon approval of a majority of the board. So now I would entertain a motion to approve or not the consent agenda.
Madam Chairman, I move to approve the consent agenda as it exists. I will have comments.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Art.
Okay, the comments almost always tend to be questions, but I was mostly on the policies that we are approving. There are 4 of them. And on those policies, I was noticing something that I haven't really seen before very much. For example, on policy 2410, there's no change except for a resource document change. And I was wondering, why is that the case? Although, you know, I had no problem with that, just it was a resource reference change. And again, the policy itself is exactly the same as it was before. And that seemed to be the case also with one of the other ones. Next on the policy 2413, I was wondering if, Dana, if you could just briefly say something about what's mastery versus competency, and what's that difference?
In our state, there's very little difference, but there will be additional ways that you can demonstrate mastery that are a little bit different than competency. So, and if you look in the dictionary, competency is a minimal level of being able to prove that you know or can do something, and mastery says you have an expertise. And so it's a change from setting an expectation at the low end for our students to a higher expectation. It still is, when you read the policy and the procedures that we are working on to accompany that new policy, it really is about giving students other ways to attain credit. So, you know, if a student can prove that they already have all the knowledge for a certain course that we offer, and providing different ways for them to prove that, so that we can award the credit and they can move on to study other things, or even to move more quickly through to graduation and out into whatever next steps they have set themselves in the world. So the whole idea, and you'll note, remember, we've just passed this as a competency-based credit set of policies just a few months ago, but in the intervening time, the State Board of Education has been doing a lot of work around the state, and their community-based committee on developing what this looks like and what it means for kids in the future felt it was really important to change that word. And because what we're talking about is we want to produce kids across the state and certainly in North Mason that are really well prepared. And we want to recognize that there's more ways that they can be prepared than in a traditional classroom way. But we don't want to say they meet the minimum. We want to say they are very well prepared. And that's the difference.
Okay.
Well, thank you. That helps. You know, I'll take my comeuppance. I should have looked in the dictionary myself.
That's okay.
But you know, you described that quite well, and that makes me feel all the better about it. On the next one, it was policy 3225, the school-based threat assessment. It looked to me like there was the notification of threats, violence, or harm was that which is a reference to that's policy 4314 was removed. Is that right?
Yes, and that's just the recommendation of the lawyers who review policies for us at WASDA, that cross-reference doesn't fit anymore, and that, you know, so that's why it's removed.
Okay, well, I guess that makes sense too. That was just similar to that other one where there's not
Yes.
very much substantive change to note. Then the last one was policy 6220 on bids. And if you could just information from what you tell us about the change in the dollar limits and how we handle that.
Yeah, basically, it's a change in the dollar limits for when we're accepting bids on projects. And basically, this is a federal change, and so that it raises that amount that we don't have to get 3 bids and to accept a contract up to $30,000. And so that is more reasonable in some cases. There are some projects that we might do, or some when we hire people to provide professional development. For example, Katie Novak is the only person in the country who does the understanding by design, the UDL learning that we're working on with our district now. And so trying to get other bids from people who are not the authors who wrote the studies on, you know, how to do universal design for learning is kind of waste of time and space. So that's a really good example. If we set up to do some professional development with her, we don't have to get bids from other people unless her cost goes over that $30,000. So that's the reason.
Is it now $50,000 instead of 30? That's what I read.
Yes, you're right.
50, and then there's a 250,000 limit, and then above that. And then the other question regarding that was self-certification. I got the impression that part of this change was applies to districts that are actually doing quite well or are financially healthier, that sort of thing, and that we would be able to self-certify ourselves on that question. I'm not quite sure what happens if a district isn't that financially healthy, if they don't get to do the 50, 250 and above, or what, but any comments?
I'll go ahead and have Ashley comment on that.
So with this one, it's all about, especially in smaller school districts where you have limited staff members, it's all about ensuring that you're going to be able to meet all of your federal, state, and local requirements in the most efficient means possible. So by increasing these thresholds, it allows us, instead of going through a competitive bid process that may take months to do after your advertising and such, it allows us to do it in a much more efficient process. Districts our size, we normally try to piggyback on existing contracts through interlocal agreements. It saves us time, which then saves us money. So by the federal government, one, coming out and allowing this increase, it allows us to utilize our federal funds in a more efficient process, saving us more money without having to go through a formal bid. So in all reality, it saves us time. And by saving us time, it allows us to go through and make the most of the money that we do get.
Okay, Ashley, can you talk about the self-certification piece?
Oh, the self-certification specifically, when you self-certify, that's you. So basically the district themselves taking responsibility, stating, hey, we know what the requirements are, and we agree that we're going to abide by them. Now, if it comes time for audit and they come in and see, hey, you didn't do what you're supposed to do, well, now you just got yourself in trouble because you self-certified that you did. So in all reality, a lot of the stuff that we do nowadays within school districts and in public entities altogether, you are self-certifying. And the way that they hold us accountable to that is through audit.
Thank you. That was very helpful, and I have no other questions on that.
Sorry. Is there any other discussion or questions or concerns? All right, we'll do another roll call vote. Art?
I vote aye.
Thank you. Arla?
Aye.
Okay. Leanna?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
And I vote aye, and the consent agenda is approved. So now we're at Resolution 1G21 Debt Service Fund Bond Payments. And could I ask for the explanation before we vote on the resolution?
Yes, and I will give a very brief explanation, and so will Ashley. If you will remember, 1 year ago, we looked at our balances in our funds, including our debt service fund for our bond from 2013. And we determined that we would be able to make a reduction in the amount we collected from our community for 1 year, which you are allowed to do. And the board took action on that and reduced the amount we were collecting for that 1 year. Now that we are going to, we can't do that again this year, and we need to return to the bond as voted by the community. And in order to do that, we have to take this action. Ashley, you have more to say?
Jackie, could you bring up that Excel spreadsheet? So I wanted to put it into as nice of layman's terms as possible. So basically what we're looking at is we used our fund balance in the debt service fund in order to roll back our collection for the bond. Right now, each year we're paying about just over $3 million. So we had a little bit over $1 million worth of excess collection in there that we applied in 2020 to our payments. Now, the very first chart that you see is if we turned around and we collected only 2.2 million, so keeping that reduced rate, when it comes time for our December 21 bond payment, we would be $560,000 short of being able to make that payment. So we would have fully exhausted the fund and we'd be in the hole. So we have a need to increase that back to not the full amount that we technically could collect, which is the $3,072,000, but we're going to use a bit of remaining fund balance that we have, but we would need to increase that collection to 2.9 million. Jackie, if you can scroll down. So I made the December 1st, 2020 bond payment at 1.8 million. Leaving us 289,000, just under 290,000 as of January 1st. We have a June 1st bond payment that equals just over $1 million. And if we project a levy collection of about half of that 2.9 million, bringing in 1.45, it would give us an ending fund balance of 673,000.
And remembering, I'm just going to interrupt really quickly. When Ashley's talking about a levy collection here, it's actually the bond levy collection. It's not our operating levy, which we don't currently have.
Yep. So this is bond repayment from what was voted on in 2013. So with that 673,000 and half of that bond collection, I would be able to make the December 1st, 2021 bond payment, which will be the just under $2 million. And it will leave us with basically $140,000 come January 1st. So we'll still have some money left in the fund, and we'll be able to fully make our bond payment. When the issue of district risks, if they short a bond payment, is it obviously impacts their Moody's rating. It's a district's credit rating. And so we don't want to risk that. So that's what the ask is for at this point. We need to increase what we are collecting in order to ensure we're going to be able to pay our bond.
And you'll remember that last year when you took that vote, it was to decrease the bond payments collected from the community members by roughly 30 cents, right, Ashley, per 100K?
Correct.
Thousand. So this is bringing back a significant portion of that 30 cents into the collection.
So basically for 1 year, we had a little respite and now we're just reinstating.
Yes.
Correct.
How much of the 30 cents would you say this is?
It's going to end up being approximately about 27 cents. So technically we have about $100,072 in excess that we technically could collect, but we've still rolled it back a little bit. So we're not collecting the full amount, but just under.
Okay.
I do have a question on the charts there, and it's just a language thing. On the upper chart, it has shortage for December payment with the
I
number
know.
of red and
Yeah.
get it. So
I just saw that, Art. Yeah, I simply didn't change it. By the very last box, we wouldn't have a shortage. That would be our ending fund balance for December 31st.
Great, thanks.
I do want to state one thing when we start talking about rates. Rates are all based upon current property values. So we don't necessarily know for a fact, because it hasn't been certified, as to what property values are for Mason County for 2021. So even though we're talking about a dollar value per 100 or per 1,000 right now, we technically don't know verbatim that it is exactly 27 cents.
And it could very well be much less because property values have increased this year.
Correct.
Okay, then, if there are no more questions or discussion.
I just, when we are presenting that we mention that, to make sure we mention the rate versus the cent. Because I think that's what caught us up last time, where people didn't understand that and they felt like we might have been hiding something when we weren't. It was just a rate difference between that. So just a bringing it up thing.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, Leanna.
Yep. And then a big clarification, this is not our operations levy, anything like this. This is a repayment of the bond that was voted on back in 2013.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. So now I would entertain a motion to a motion on this resolution.
So moved. I move we accept.
Okay, thanks, John. No more discussion, or is there any other questions for Ashley or Dana? All right, we'll have a roll call vote. John?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Leanna?
Aye.
Art?
Aye.
And I vote aye, and the resolution is approved. So now we're at item number 4.
Yes, this will be a short report today, but bringing your attention to the fact that we will probably have a longer discussion in the future. As you know, we've been engaged now for quite some time in a discussion with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife about a transfer of responsibility for the wetlands, the park portion of the wetlands, not the classroom portion, to the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife so that they can maintain that park and those trails for the good of our community. We are closer to bringing a document or a set of documents to the board for discussion about finalizing that transfer. And you will know, remember, we will have a process, that we have a public process for making a transfer between government entities that will allow for community comment before a final decision is made. But we are hoping that, or I know Fish and Wildlife is hoping, and their real estate people and lawyers are working with our district's real estate lawyer on putting together the paperwork to be able to let this transfer take place and move forward. We are expecting that maybe we will have those documents to discuss in February at our meeting, and if not by then, certainly in March. So I did want you to have an update on where we are moving in that process.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the superintendent? All right, so now we are at board development and linkage, and back to you, Dana.
Great, and we'll start with Ashley again with the budget status updates.
Okay, so we're gonna start with our other funds. So our capital projects fund currently is sitting at about 587,000. I know technically the capital projects update is next, but Dana, if you don't mind too much, I can swing into that right now. Okay, so we have substantial progress on all of our capital projects, and it actually makes me super happy to see. But our softball field, the ADA ramp went in. That was the last thing we were waiting on for that project. So we're working on the process to get that signed off. Our stadium, we are done with that project. The press box is done. It's absolutely gorgeous. So we're working.
I would remind you people, we have a community member who's providing some beautification projects to the stadium already, which will include some really neat, really large Go Bulldogs signage and things. And we're looking forward to adding that.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the work itself, like the actual substantial completion, is done. And like Dana said, they're working on beautifying it at this point. And then the piece that I'm most excited about is our portable project that has just been an ongoing and lingering thing for over a year now. We got our occupancy permit just in time for our early kindergartners to be able to enjoy the classroom, and it's all set up and it looks wonderful. So that one's done now, and we're getting ready to sign off on that. The roof has been done now for quite a few months, Sand Hills roof. So all of our capital projects, as of right now, are completed, as in dollars out the door. So the remaining amount, this $587,000 you're seeing, this is interest collected over time on the funds that were in the capital projects fund. And it's also part of the money that was transferred from the state forest money that was transferred from the debt service fund over to the capital projects fund to help maintain district buildings. So now we're working on some ideas on some other maintenance items that needed to be done across the district that can be funded with this remaining amount. And when we're further in discussion with that, I'm sure it will be coming to the board. So that's where we're sitting at with all of our projects and our fund balance there. The debt service fund, this is the fund that you can see is looking sort of sad right now. So you can definitely see that bond payment that was made in December, dropping us down to just under 290,000. ASB, we're sitting fairly stagnant at 385,000. We are starting to see some money trickle in through some fundraisers for some of the athletic events for some of the sports. So we do expect to see that increase here shortly, but then once the sports are actually fully active, we'll see that decrease again. And then transportation vehicles.
Let me interject there too, Ashley. Since we did that with capital projects, the WIAA and our local league released our sports schedules for the first sports that will be able to have competitions this year if our state moves Mason County into the level 2 of their new community levels. And if those will begin the week of February 8th. So we do have schedules for girls soccer, volleyball, cross country, and football at this time beginning that week. As long as all the conditions are met, our teams have been meeting and practicing and following all the new guidelines, wearing masks and etc. One thing that will be different this year is the league has also voted that because the limit that WIAA and the State Department of Health put on how many people can be in a venue at a time, and because we want to really focus on the students getting the opportunity to participate and preventing students or anyone else from transmission of COVID during game attendance, in our league, there will be no spectators allowed at those events at this time. So that could change, but the current decision is teams will be there, coaches will be there, officials will be there, spectators will not be there. We will, however, stream all of our home events, and we have a staff member who's going to work with some of our students to make sure that that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the transportation vehicle fund, we're gonna see it only increase by interest all the way up until August when we get our depreciation payment. We're not expecting any other revenues to hit this account until August. So enrollment tends not to be my favorite slide, but we only dropped by 5 FTE from December to January, so that's good. And right now, overall, we're tracking about 155 FTE loss from budget, which obviously isn't super positive, but it looks like we're starting to sort of trend even now, which is better than what we had initially seen with the declines. So do you guys have any questions on the other funds or enrollment at this time?
Yeah, I think I have a question about enrollment and I'm formulating it as I'm thinking now, so bear with me. But when a student, when you're actually tracking whether or not a student is coming back, how is that actually tracked? Is there a process that a parent goes through to de-enroll their student, paperwork that's actually being filled out? Do you follow up with kids that just haven't been showing up, or like, what is that process like?
Well, there's yes to all of that. So there is a paperwork process when a parent disenrolls their kid to enroll them somewhere else. There's also right now we're far exceeding, but in normal times there's a 20-day rule, and if students don't attend for 20 days or in this case engage for 20 days, they have to be dropped from the rolls. The state has made a little bit of change this year. Is you don't drop them completely, you don't get to count them for funding, but they want us to keep trying to find those kids and get them engaged, and that's what we are doing. However, our staff are working on a daily and weekly basis when kids don't show up right now to try to minimize that as much as possible. It is really a struggle and really hard for many of our kids to engage in online learning. So we're really excited, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, that we're getting kids back in school. And our staff are coming up with new projects too. One of the things as we start to get kids back in sports, unfortunately, many of the kids who sports is why they go to school every day and keeps them engaged. They've been struggling with engaging in online learning in many cases, and are having those issues with grades and et cetera that won't make them be able to be eligible for early participation. So our coaches and building leadership are working together to provide on-campus so it's about when they come to practice, they also have to go to study table so that they can get their grades up so that they can participate. And so we work on it a lot of different ways this year, in some ways differently. There is a little bit more flexibility in how we count attendance right now, but that also puts a lot more pressure on us to make sure we're really communicating with our kids and know where they are and why we're not seeing them and what we can do to fix that if we can.
Yeah, I hear, I see a tiny, tiny piece of that just at home with Garrett and his kids, but So just to clarify, when a student is not engaged, we do count them toward this FTE, or we do not?
No, we can't.
Okay, thanks.
And I think it's important to note too, that this 155 FTE loss is clearly about $1.5 million in revenue that we're losing, in addition to no levy. So there's another hit that we've taken.
And as
Correct.
we look to next year and we're budgeting for next year, we always budget conservatively. We will base our budget for next year based on our current enrollment. And so that means we will be budgeting for fewer employees, because right now we have more employees than we're getting funded for because of the loss of enrollment.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. Go ahead.
Yep. So
John had a question, Ashley.
Yeah. Are we sustainable? I mean, I'm concerned about the long run here. I asked the same thing of the board of my colleagues on Mason Transit, because we're going through a lot of reductions too. And I mean, here we have these big expenses and we're taking these hits from revenue that's no longer coming in. Is this a sustainable operation?
We are working on it. We will ensure that we are sustainable, John, but things may look very different in many ways to ensure that that happens. We are taking hits. We are getting, as people have noted, some federal support. Those dollars come with a lot of fences around how they can be spent, but they will shore up some things for us. And we are going above and beyond to ensure our sustainability as a district. We have already, unlike some districts, we have spent every single dollar we got from the first CARES Act. And as soon as ESSER 2 gets released, we know where we need to spend it to support kids and keep our district moving forward. We also took advantage of the opportunity to receive some CARES Act dollars that the county in Kitsap County received and distributed to schools, and added that to helping cover our expenses at this time. And unique among, under probably, you can count them on one hand, teachers or districts in the state, we have applied for FEMA funding to help support us through our COVID expenses. And we are collecting FEMA dollars on a regular basis. And Ashley is working very closely with our contact at FEMA about what we can, what invoices we can submit, what positions we can fund from FEMA, because, you know, although we've budgeted conservatively and we're actually in our expenses on employees and stuff right now, we are actually below budget in many cases in overall, but there's still expenses that are there, and we want to build that fund balance for next year when we don't know what will happen with levy. And FEMA has been an excellent opportunity for us. It's not covering 100%, but just even today, we were able to negotiate some additional positions that we need to ensure health and safety of kids. And because those are new and additional positions and they're temporary positions, and they're to make sure our buildings are clean enough and our students are safe. And in some cases, it's para support and those kinds of things, that we can charge those back to FEMA, to the federal government, and they will not hit our fund balance. So those kinds of adjustments that we're making are very important and are going to be why we will be able to be sustainable. But this is painful right now, and we're going to struggle. We're going to get through it, but not without some pain.
Well, thank you for that. I'm always confident that you guys know what you're doing. But sometimes when we get into the details and I see all these minuses, it just raises these larger questions. But both Dan and Ashley have honest faces, and the charts are really neat. So I trust all is going well. And like, you know, I understand what you're talking about, but I do like to raise that larger question from time to time.
Well, and one of the things that we did really early on, John, is when we saw the writing on the wall,
Yeah.
we went extremely conservative, much more so than some of our counterparts, but we knew that we were in a different position than some of these other districts, and that we wouldn't have a spring levy collection to be able to fall back on. Therefore, some of the options that other districts got to utilize weren't on the table for us. So like Dana was saying, Dana and we're actually talking finances almost on a daily basis at this point. When we were going over some of the
hourly.
yeah, in all reality, when we were going over some of the big picture numbers earlier, and we're trending out where we had budgeted to be at this point of the year in certificated salaries, classified salaries, benefits, supplies, we are under in every single area, simply because when we knew that we were going to be hitting these financial constraints, we cut back even further than what we had cut back due to the levy loss. So we're in a solid position for where we are now. And we are tracking everything at the legislative level as far as any potential changes that could be coming our way. And next month, I'll be able to give you a little bit more detail as to what these financial impacts due to the loss of enrollment and the loss of transportation pupil ridership will actually look like when it comes to our budget, our remaining budget dollars for this year and going into next year.
Well, thank you very much. Very reassuring.
Okay, so total revenues to date, we've collected about 34.2% of what we would have been projected to collect. So you can see we're about 3% over. That's due to the efforts on the district to go out and find this additional funding. So anytime a potential grant pops up, even if we think it may be a long shot, like the FEMA side, we're applying for it. I can't count the number of conversations I've had with our FEMA rep, and the amount of paperwork that is required that goes into this. But at the end of the day, 3% of revenues, when you're dealing with 36 million in revenues, it helps. And so we're seeing that increase there. Our local sources, so this would be our levy and fees, fines that are normally paid. You're seeing that our trend's off, but that's because, systems trend based upon past practices. Past practices would say that you have a fall and a spring levy collection, and we don't. So you can see that we have collected about 75%. The question I get most about this one is, okay, if you already collected your last levy payment in October, why are you seeing almost a 25% difference there? Shouldn't it be 100% at this point? Well, unfortunately, it's a pandemic. So we've had, community members and families hit hard, and unfortunately, they haven't been able to pay their property taxes, meaning the collection has been lower than anticipated. State sources to date, we're currently sitting about 1% under what we should collect. This trend, you're going to see a fairly significant difference come next month. And that is if we don't get that legislative help on that enrollment side, that 1.5 million that Laura was talking about. We collect portions of that on a monthly basis. And so when the state here within the next week, they redo our funding based upon actual enrollment, and they see that we're actually missing 155 students, they're going to start taking that money back from us. And that's where we're going to see the hit right there, is in that blue semicircle. Federal sources, year to date, we should have only collected about 24%. We're at 32%. Thank you, federal government, because that's definitely one of the things that's helping us out right now. So our top 10 sources, one of the things that I always like to point out is our state forest revenue, because that's always a gift, because you don't know if you're going to get it or not. We collected just under 100,000 year to date. Unfortunately, we're not going to see more collections in that area for the remainder of the school year, because you only collect it. The state only has to pay you it if you have a local levy. in your general fund, which we do not. So we'll be sitting at about 100,000 there for the rest of the remainder of the school year. Can we go to expenses? Okay, so that green semicircle, that's the one that I track on a monthly basis because my goal is to keep us at 10%. That's where we need to be in order to start next school year and be able to get through the lack of an October levy collection. Per policy, we need to be between 8 and 10%. So if we hit 8% though, we're going to get into some challenging months come November and December when our payments from the state are less because they expect you to have collected an October levy payment. So right now we're trending okay, but again, we have received money from the state that they will be taking back due to the decrease in enrollment. Our total expenditures, actual year to date, here's where you're starting to see some of those savings. Our projected year to date should have been about 34.22. We're at 30.8. So we're trending about 4% under. Again, when you're looking at 4% of 36 million, it actually does add up quite quickly. Our salaries and benefits, actual year to date, when you budget for positions, whoever you have on your payroll going into the next year, as of May 16th is who you have on the certificated side. So we are seeing us sit just about 1% under in that area due to some additional cuts we made on the classified side once we saw that funding was going to be impacted. We're trending about 2% under our general expenses for basic education year to date at this point. Do you guys have any questions regarding the general revenue or expenditures before we get into more detail?
I just have a question about the transportation. I know you didn't necessarily pull that out here, but it's my understanding that we may lose transportation money as well as enrollment money. Is that correct?
You're correct, Flora. So the month of February is when the state turns around and they recalculate what you should be receiving for transportation funding. Unfortunately, the law that states how you are to be funded for school district transportation is they utilize an averaging factor of per pupil ridership. So the number of kids you have on your morning route, the number of kids you have on your afternoon route, and they pay you per pupil. Now they're using a spring of 2020, a fall of 2020, and a winter of 2020 count in order to calculate what they owe us. In spring, we didn't have ridership. And in fall, we had 92. We normally average 2,800. And in the winter count closes tomorrow. We will be over 92, but we will be nowhere near 2,800. So because of that, they pay us based upon 2,800 because it's based upon budget. And then they're going to true it up to actuals in February. So at this point, we are on track to receive 0 transportation funding in the months of February through August. Now, we're transporting kids more so now than we were in the fall. And so that will be coming directly from fund balance.
So who do we talk to at OSBI to?
Yes, we need to talk to Chris, and I have been over the last 2 days. We need to talk to our legislators. Prior to Tuesday, in the House, there was a bill to stabilize. I'll get them backwards. To stabilize transportation. No, it's the other way. The House was to stabilize enrollment, right?
Yeah.
And the Senate to stabilize transportation. But then people started talking about, some of the districts are getting those ESSER $2. Although I want to point out that those are targeted at supporting schools that receive Title I funds and supporting efforts to meet students' learning loss, not for things like transportation and enrollment, which is our state's basic education obligation to our students. So Chris Reichdahl wrote a proposed plan that he presented on Tuesday night. And I don't know, I have to look and see if it's hit in a bill form yet, but it will go in a bill form to the legislature that says, hey, we have a fix. What we're going to do is we're going to tell those school districts who qualify for Title I, those high poverty districts, you know what, just spend your federal dollars on these things that we owe you, because we're not giving you any money. And we're going to give the money to the low poverty districts. So right now in his proposal, and John, this is regionalization on steroids. In his proposal of the total dollars that they're going to distribute across the state, that should be distributed equally to support students across the state, regardless of their location, 40% of those dollars, right?
Dana, it's 40 million, 20%.
20% of the dollars, $40 million, are going to two districts, Lake Washington and Issaquah. North Mason is getting 0. So we're going to be battling that. We do need to engage with our legislators. I can talk with you all individually about how best to help do that. And we need to engage not just with our local legislators, but with the leadership in the House and Senate Ed and Finance committees, because those are the people who are letting these things get into or out of committee and into or on the floor. And if they do not understand that they cannot stand up, and our governor cannot stand up, and our OSPI superintendent cannot stand up and say, the most important thing that we're focusing on in this state is equity, and then slap in the face those children who are furthest from educational justice, who do not have an equitable start to begin with, and give the dollars to the wealthy district's children.
Well, you have successfully gotten my attention. If there's anything that I can do to cause trouble, do let me know.
Yeah, we'll talk in the morning, John.
Yeah, okay. I presume airstrikes via
Airstrikes via
internet, that kind of thing.
commenting on the
Give me
legislature.
the info. What you said was eloquent and forceful. And if I have some version of that to play with, I mean, just let me know what the mission is, and I'll be happy to do what I can.
We'll do that. Thank
Well,
you.
and the key for those two districts, and what makes this so just mind-blowing, both of those districts have less than 10% poverty. So Issaquah's at 8.6 and Lake Washington's at 9.5. We're at 60%. And we get nothing.
If you take the list of who got money and you line that up with the list of who has the highest regionalization dollars,
They match.
they match. So
Yeah.
we like to spend money on the rich kids in our state, but we don't care about the other kids, is the message that is being sent by Reichdahl's proposal. And that is unacceptable.
Dana, can you tell me, is SR, is that an acronym?
Yeah, it's ESSR2. It's the federal bill that was voted on to support a broad range of things, including education in the COVID crisis, and I think passed through at the federal level on New Year's Eve, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the HEALS Act. So the first round was the CARES Act. This is the HEALS Act.
Okay. So is it, just a second, and then I'll get to you, Leanna. Is this, okay, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, did OSPI make the recommendation for how this is to be distributed?
Yes, that I just told you what their recommendation is.
Yeah.
Their recommendation is don't give money to schools with high poverty, give it to the rich schools.
Okay, Leanna?
And what is their justification for that?
Well, you guys are getting money from the feds, so you can spend that federal money on the things that it's not for, transportation and enrollment stabilization. And then we can spend state money for those districts who didn't get any federal money. Two different reasons to spend money.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry for that little bird walk there, but I thought it was important to talk about.
Sorry, I
So
got
it-
so excited, but I will share information so you guys can get online at the legislature. You can testify during meetings or you can testify in writing when they are not in session. And Aaliyah, if you send this information out to the students, if we can get students to blast everybody, that would be awesome.
Yep.
With nice words, no bad words, but to send a lot of messages.
Okay.
okay.
Work on some sort of like template or,
Yeah, I'll send a message you can use.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go down to the next slide and look at what our fund balance is tracking. And so this is where my heart breaks a little bit when I see this. So we have been working extremely hard to get, you can't see it right now because of how hard we've worked to get this green triangle that's over on the right-hand side, okay, to match that blue line. And we're there. But the problem is it's made up of borrowed funds now because of the enrollment decline and the fact that if something doesn't change, we're not going to get that stabilization. Okay. We needed to be at that green triangle in order to get us through the lack of a fall levy collection for next year. This is where we track what our end of the year fund balance would be. And so we really needed to be at that green triangle. So as of right now, we are. So we were really hoping that we could just get this stabilization, then we would be in a solid position to start next year. Now, I'm waiting on bated breath at this point for the state to post our apportionment document, which is our 64-page document that outlines every formula on how we get funded, to determine how much of that money right there is going to be taken back from us. So that's sort of where we're at. So next month, you'll be able to have a better picture of what our gap's going to look like. Okay, next slide. Okay, so red can be scary. So the top is our revenues. So right now we're trending about 1.8 million under what we had budgeted. That 1.58 million is due to the enrollment decline. We're about $311,000 under collected in local levy. That money will come in slowly. So even though we don't have a 2021 levy collection, back taxes are still paid and the district will still get that when it is paid. And then the state general special purpose, again, that's tied to apportionment and it's due to the enrollment decrease. Your local support non-tax, those would be the fines, fees, food service revenue, those type of things that you would see during a normal school year in which you have kids coming into the district and you have your full range of kids coming into the district and you have all programs operating as usual. So we will see a decrease in that area throughout the rest of the year, since it does not look like we'll be able to operate everything fully like we would normally during a non-pandemic year. On our expenditure side, black is positive because those are the areas that we've made up differences. We're trending under budget, and then red is where we're currently over budget. And so we're a tad bit over budget on certificated salaries. A lot of that is just due to unbudgeted movement on the salary schedule. And then you're seeing that $5,509 for travel. If you look though, it's forecasting because it's saying, hey, you haven't traveled at all this year and that's not normal. Why haven't you traveled? So everything else is zero and it's saying, okay, they haven't traveled so far. So sometime during the year, they're likely going to do $5,509 worth of travel. There's not any travel. So it's showing up as a negative. In reality, it's not. It's just forecasting it. So We've saved about 802,000 of that just under 1.8 million. And so we're currently sitting just under $1 million of a deficit at this point. And we keep trying to bridge that gap. And as a team, we have been doing very, very well. Again, like Dana was saying earlier, when we're having to add a position, I'm bartering with our FEMA rep on if we're going to add this position, what does this position have to do in order for you guys to pay for them? You know, how do we phrase the job description? How many hours can we get reimbursed? A slew of questions. Zach has become my friend and knows to expect calls before we add anything. So that's helping bridge that gap in the meantime. Next slide. Okay, so this one gets into a little bit more detail as far as our general ed program codes, showing where we're currently sort of in the hole and where we have the savings. The biggest one right there, that 250,000, you can see from the technology side, that's due to the purchase of all the computers to ensure that we could go one-to-one this year, to make sure that all of our kids had access to technology while they were learning remotely. We did get a good chunk of that reimbursed both through Kitsap County and through our first set of CARES Act ESSER dollars. But and unfortunately, technology is expensive and we weren't able to get it all reimbursed without maxing out or before we maxed out our collection. So we're still about 250,000 in the hole on that side. But other than that, you can sort of see where we've seen our savings so far this year and where we're currently trending over. Do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns that haven't already been addressed or brought up so far?
I just had a quick question about what BEA stands for.
It's our basic education.
It's a really good point, Arla. We all get used to using acronyms for so much in the field of education. We really ought to get used to saying it so that everybody, all those people who are listening, all those hundreds of people who chimed in on this board meeting will know, right? Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, that's what I'd figured, but just double checking.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Well, my comment is, one more time, you have managed to keep us floating on top rather than sinking under, but I know it's getting more difficult. So I feel like we all as a board need to make a concerted effort to let the people at the state level know what's going on here. I don't think they get it.
That would be greatly appreciated. I just keep crossing every finger I have that we're going to get some bailout. Cruise industries get bailouts, car industries get bailouts. With this, we need ours at this point. We need it. That's what it comes down to.
We do. Thanks for all your hard work, Ashley.
Thanks, Laura.
So teaching and learning update, Dana.
All right, well, I've talked a lot about a lot of things tonight, and the number one thing in teaching and learning is that kids are coming back to school in hybrid model. We started last week with K2. We've been very successful. Next Thursday, grades 3 through 8 come back. Now, we do have a different metric for when we can allow kids back in school at the high school than the other grades, and we're not close to that number yet, but we are planning for when we get close enough to get the high school kids back as soon as possible too. The metrics that we're having to use right now, according to all of the health departments, et cetera, with P through 8, we need to have our 2-week average cases per 100,000 new cases to be 350 per 100,000 or less. We, on one of the days since we started back, we topped 350, but as a trend, we're below 350. Today we hit 277, I think. So we're headed in the right direction. The number for high school is 200. And we're going to look at averages as we look at that, and how, as we get closer, then we're going to be talking to our high school kids and their families about, okay, get ready, it's your turn. So we're very excited that we're getting kids back in person. I think Bess sums it up talking to one of our bus drivers who was a little nervous about driving little kiddos last week, because she normally drives high school kids, but at the end of the day, a little kindergartner got on her bus, and even through the mask, she could see this huge wide smile on his face. And she asked him how his day went, and he looked at her and he said, "It was the very best day in my whole life." So we're excited to have our kids back in school. The rest of my report is, I have a slew of proclamations to talk to you about, and so I'm going to go through them. The first one, we were reminded by the Washington State School Retirees Association that this is Washington State School Retired School Employees Month and week coming up here in March, and want to make sure we get this out before, because sometimes we forget to do these in the month that they exist. So we will read it again in March, but the week of March 15th through 21st is declared by Governor Inslee to recognize retired school employees for all of their work on the behalf of our students and their welfare throughout the state and throughout their careers. So we will read that one again, because I have so many others to read in total to you. The next one is a very important one, actually, and this one is, and not one we've had before. This is new from the governor. So this is in recognition of the Whole Child Month, and this is very important in North Mason, where our focus is on the whole child. And Governor Inslee says, whereas each student deserves to be challenged academically, exposed to a comprehensive education that promotes critical thinking and creativity, and be prepared for higher education, meaningful employment in our global economy, and lifelong success. And whereas every student deserves to be supported by qualified, caring adults and have access to personalized learning opportunities. And whereas every student deserves the opportunity to be actively engaged in and connected to school and the broader community. And whereas according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, most youth in the United States do not get the recommended amount of daily physical activity, and students who lack the food and resources for healthy living are less likely to be attentive in school and have higher absenteeism rates, which can lead to lower academic performance. And whereas local, state, and national organizations that provide coordinated education, health, and social services to children and youth in Washington recognize a whole child approach that decreases truancy and disruptive behaviors and improves academic performance and student well-being. Now, therefore, I, J. Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby proclaim January 2021 to be Whole Child Month in Washington, and I encourage all people in our state to join me in this special observance. So thank you to the governor's office for recognizing the importance of meeting the needs of the whole child in school and in our community. And we're really proud to be able to read this proclamation in support of the work that we do here in North Mason. So my next one is another new one in our state is that January has been declared National Mentoring Month, and we were particularly asked to read this aloud in support of our partnership with Graduate Strong. So I'm going to read this to you as well. Whereas North Mason School District honors caring adult mentors who support young people by showing up for them every day and demonstrating their commitment to helping them thrive. And whereas mentoring programs make our communities and our state stronger, and whereas quality mentoring promotes healthy relationships and communication, positive self-esteem, and a growth of a young person, and whereas students who meet regularly with their mentors are more than 52% less likely than their peers to skip a day of school, and youth who face an opportunity gap but have a mentor are 55% more likely to be enrolled in college than those who did not have a mentor. And whereas youth who meet regularly with their mentors are 46% less likely than their peers to start using drugs and 27% less likely to start drinking. And whereas 2/3 of adults consider it highly important for young people to have mentors, and that same population estimates that only 1/4 of youth have the mentors they need. And whereas nearly 9 in 10 feel that more mentoring is needed in our country, and whereas research shows that 44% of adults are not yet mentoring but are willing to consider it, and mentoring is poised for growth, 18 to 29-year-olds are more than twice as likely to cite having had a mentor in their childhood than those over 50. And whereas almost half of today's young adults report having a mentor in their youth, and those rates appear to have been rising steadily over the past several decades, and whereas National Mentoring Month is the time of year where engagement from community members interested in becoming a mentor is highest, and an opportunity to celebrate, elevate, and encourage mentoring in communities across the country, now we, the Board of Directors of North Mason School District, do hereby proclaim January 21st as National Mentoring Month, recognized here in North Mason School District.
That's awesome.
And one more.
Just a quick question. You said graduate strong,
Mhm.
but I've got Kitsap strong here on my.
It is actually Graduate Strong because we are included and we are not Kitsap. So Graduate Strong is a subgroup of Kitsap Strong.
Oh, maybe
It
we
is
need
focused on school graduation.
We need a Mason strong. North
Yes.
Mason strong, yeah.
And finally, very important, this is something we do every January. We are celebrating School Board Recognition Month. So, whereas the mission of Washington's public school system is to assure that all students achieve at high levels and possess the knowledge and skills to be responsible citizens of a democratic society who enjoy productive and satisfying lives. And whereas Washington's 295 locally elected school boards and 9 elected educational service district boards are the core of the public education governance system in our state. And whereas the districts and regions they lead serve more than 1 million students, have a combined annual budget of over $15 billion, and employ approximately 120,000 people. And whereas school directors play a crucial role in promoting student learning and achievement by creating a vision, establishing policies and budgets, and setting clear standards of accountability for all involved. And whereas school directors are directly accountable to the citizens of their districts and regions, serving as a vital link between members of the community and their schools. And whereas school directors and educational service districts provide a passionate voice of advocacy for public schools and the welfare of school children. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize school directors as outstanding volunteers and champions for public education, now therefore I.J. Inslee, Governor of the State of Washington, do hereby proclaim January 2021 as School Board Recognition Month in Washington, and I encourage all people in our state to join me in this special observance. Thank you, board members, for all that you do for the students of North Mason.
Thank you. So, and I think we already covered capital projects, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so now we are at upcoming board letter columnists, and Leanna, you have January. And maybe the message that you work on in January, you can meet with Dana, and I will too, to keep the same message, just keep adding to the message in terms of funding for schools.
And I think we can also, as we talk about that, weave in our focus here in the district on meeting the needs of the whole child and some of the examples of things that we are doing to support our children in these difficult times.
Awesome. Okay. And then Arla, you have March, and Art has April, and John has May. And typically this is it's a board letter that we post on the on our web site, our school website, district website. And there isn't a particular due date for it. But as soon as you get it in, it will go up, and then you could also post it on your own personal social media website if you choose to do that. But I think it's important, and I don't know how many people go to the district website to find these.
We also put them on the Facebook page when we post them, because I think people see those more than on the website.
Probably, yeah. Okay, and we are now at assurance of organizational performance and policy review. These are two policies that we discussed and approved last month to be in compliance. Is there any further discussion on ER 08, communication and counsel to the board, or ER 5, budget execution, excuse me? Anybody have anything they would like to add? We did not indicate a need to revise these policies during our monitoring. So this is just an opportunity for any further comment or discussion if you have. We're at adjournment. So for the good of the order, this is an opportunity for board members and the superintendent to make any comments or announcements that may or may not be related to agenda items or public comments. Anyone have anything that they would like to add?
I would.
Art?
Yes, just wanted to alert the rest of the board and anyone else who's listening. I think I mentioned something like this earlier, but we've now had, and Laura, you know this already, the scholarship foundation that the community has called North Mason Scholarship Foundation, which has a fairly large endowment, is going to be receiving another $100,000 to add to that endowment from the death a year ago of actually the person who was really our founder, which was Peter Overton. And, well, he wasn't actually our founder, he was our financial supporter in the beginning. In any case, that will bring our endowment up to close to $1.5 million for strictly for the purpose of scholarships for local kids. That's it.
That's pretty awesome. Anybody else for the good of the order?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. Can you all hear me? Am I on?
Yes, you're on.
Yeah, as part of my other life, this was Martin Luther King, the week that we celebrate him. As part of a personal discipline, I've been reading some things I don't ordinarily read, such as liberation theology. And that comes in a variety of sizes, from black to whatever. Listening to the stuff that we've been talking about tonight seems right out of the pages of people that are outraged about the oppressed all around the world. And it righteously pisses me off that a district that is poverty, that is rural, is getting the same sort of leftover stuff that goes to other people. So I look forward with a certain fervor to seeing what we can do to oppress our oppressors with the good news of education.
Thank you, John. Always appreciate your comments. So now we are at the board self-assessment of the meeting, and Director Shepard Bull will process the board's self-assessment.
Thank you, Laura. So I just go through one by one.
However you choose to do it.
So under general meeting behavior, rating the board as behavior as satisfactory or not satisfactory. I do believe that the agenda was well planned and the board followed its agenda, did not allow itself to get sidetracked. Board members prepared for and contributed to the meeting. The meeting proceeded without interruptions or distractions. The board's deliberations and decision-making processes were public. I believe participation was balanced and all participated. Members certainly listened attentively. Work was conducted in an atmosphere of trust and openness, and meeting participants treated each other with respect and courtesy. So I will rate all of those as satisfactory. And under governance principles review, I do believe that all of these principles were followed, that board actions occurred at the policy level, and we reviewed policy about each topic before discussing that issue. Policies started with a broad statement and became more detailed in a logical and disciplined sequence. We minimized time spent monitoring past performance. We routinely dedicated time to reviewing our own process. The board clarified priorities and values when considering potential outcomes, beneficiaries, and costs of outcomes. The board does follow an annual calendar based on a plan for doing its work. The board chair did help the board efficiently conduct its meeting. The board spent most of its time deliberating issues, defining and clarifying its vision, and linking it with the community as opposed to fixing things. And the board did support the superintendent in any reasonable interpretation of its policies. So yes to all of those, and overall, I rate as satisfactory.
Thank you. Our next board meeting date will be February 18th at 6:30 here in the district office boardroom. Most likely will be another online meeting unless we hear otherwise. And at
Yeah,
this,
the Oakland public meeting exceptions in the governor's proclamation have been extended through September.
oh, okay. All right, well, we're kind of getting used to it, so that's good. At this time, we will adjourn into executive session for approximately no more than 30 minutes, maybe less, for the purpose of discussing the superintendent's mid-year evaluation. No action will be taken as a result of this executive session, and then we will reconvene to adjourn the meeting. So at this point, we're adjourning into executive session, and Jackie will be placing the school board member